In 1957, the film 12 Angry Men came to the table of cinema to sow gripping discussions and shocking revelations into the world of Hollywood and beyond. Today, one of my best friends joins me to rave about this all-time great movie and bold, complex coffee. This is the Being Real podcast. My name is Evan. Jacob, it's time to Being Real. Welcome to the Being Real podcast. My name is Evan Shableski, and I am here with my best man, the only man in my life, Jacob Olette. Jacob, how are you?
Hi, Evan. I'm doing great. You're also my best man here and in life.
I don't think I could have picked a better best man.
Oh, well, thank you.
You're welcome.
Thank you. I know no one better as well.
I want you to tell me a little bit about you. Maybe we can start about the area you're living in, the work you do. If you just want to give me a little bit about that.
Yeah, of course. So, for the viewers, we both grew up together since we were young children, age 3 of 4. Now we're best friends of up to 20 years now. I grew up with Evan, and I live down in Virginia in the Washington D.C. area. Every day I go in, I do my job, and I come home.
Coming to bed, honey. Do my job, go to bed. Well,
no, please.
I just want to say the area you're from is so beautiful, especially when we recently came up in the fall time. I don't think there's any area better than like eastern, almost southern United States, if that makes any sense. Can we just say Virginia area?
Yeah, we can say that. It's a beautiful area, coming from the cold, harsh winters of just along the lake shore of Erie to down the coasts of the Atlantic with a nice warm breeze year round, super mild. It's a breath of fresh air.
Have you adjusted to the warmer climate?
I would say no. I don't think I'll ever actually get adjusted to the warmer climate, but I have become soft.
Soft?
We had this, yes, very soft. We had this snowstorm.
Are we calling Southerners soft?
I'm calling myself soft.
Okay.
Yes. I wasn't so very grizzled before coming down here. So you
don't have your leather skin yet, is what you're telling me.
No,
and you might
never
not
did.
ever have it.
No, absolutely not. I don't think I'm going any more north at this point in my life.
Yeah, we definitely come from the pale and ghostly civilization in upper Pennsylvania.
Mm-hmm.
Everyone's very sickly looking. I do have to say, going down your way, I find that people, I guess relatively, are more vibrant appearing.
Okay.
Do you think that's appropriate to say?
It's vibrant, but I think it's this, I don't want to call it hustle culture because it's not a hustle culture. It's everyone's trying to get somewhere. Everyone's moving fast. Everything's kind of a blur. It's a very fast area. Went recently to Texas, and just the atmosphere, the laid back, just the culture of just this, like, everything's going to work out. It's going to be okay. We're going to take it at our speed. It was really nice. And you could definitely see that it's just this completely different, area and environment that you see when you come down here.
For sure. Going back to your point, like the buzzword hustle culture, I think that was really prevalent when we were coming out of high school into college, the big boom of social media taking off, this hustle mentality that, everything's a go. If you're not recording or documenting the success you're having, you're not as visible and therefore less engaged with, especially in those major metropolitan areas like the area you live in.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I don't want to say kids these days, but it's
The ripe old age of 20
yeah,
something.
yeah, I get to say it now. So yeah, it's kind of this area, the hustle culture. It's kind of the feeling that we got when we left high school, like you were saying. It's like you're kind of seeped in that all the time. And kids these days have this great entrepreneur. Yeah, exactly. Have this great kind of entrepreneurial attitude along a lot of things, and I deeply admire it because I wouldn't call myself a rebel, but I like to think of myself as kind of the antithesis to hustle culture.
Well, I think that's also interesting that you bring that up about hustle culture and in particular our generation. I feel like in some ways we haven't been really set up by previous generations to live, the ideal life. It's interesting what's born out of that. I feel like a lot of our colleagues and our peers, they have this hunger and this desire to do right by the world, but also for themselves, something that you might not have seen before. But what I want to know from you is, do you know the exact point where we met?
Oh, I don't think so. It's just one of those things in life that just kind of was at all points. I don't. Do you? Do you have any?
We've seen pictures, or we're together as young children, maybe like 4 or 5. I think I first remember when we were in elementary school together, and I was like, oh yeah, there's that kid that my parents always take me to see. I should probably be friends with him. We might have been in the same homeroom at some point.
Actually, well, in kindergarten, I can tell you, we weren't. Okay. And it's interesting that you say that because I'm also curious about when we sort of like we knew that we were like friends.
We knew the other existed.
Yeah, like I distinctly remember because in kindergarten we would switch rooms halfway through the day. Yes. And you were in the homeroom that switched with us. And so I remember
homeroom swingers.
Yeah. Yeah, that's a weird thing to say for elementary students, but of course when we would switch classes, we would all, be in our lines, and when we would pass each other, we'd say hi or we'd high five.
Yes.
And thinking back, I see that point as okay, so we were friends already. Well,
it just seems like an odd thing to do. Like, yeah, man.
Well, it's
switching homerooms.
Yeah. Nice. No, I think we were just excited to see each other, and I was excited to see you. I'm like, hey, there's this guy I know in the other homeroom.
Oddly enough, I feel like we were a part of the crowd of people who everyone liked, but weren't necessarily talked about. I feel like we were in that zone. But for some reason in elementary school, we thought we were hot shit.
Oh, because we were. Of course we were.
I needed your validation is what I'm saying. that we were, in fact, the shit.
Oh, absolutely. 100%.
I remember we would make up these fantasies about girls fawning over us for no reason.
Oh, yeah. Yeah. And we would...
We peaked young.
Yeah, we did.
There's been multiple peaks, but we were shooting for the stars young.
Mm-hmm.
Like we came up with this thing that when girls would cross our paths in elementary school, mind you, that we would like snap
finger guns,
like West Side Story. Okay, like West Side Story, kind of like, hey, I'm walking here, like finger snapping.
Okay.
Finger guns sounds violent. I don't know how to describe what we did, but it was like. We did the snaps, and then we made the sound of girls fainting, and I think it was out loud amongst other people, and I just wonder what might we have looked like from the outside in.
Like 2 hot shots, just shooting the breeze. That's for sure.
Fantastic.
You're like, look at those cool guys, and if they were to do that to me,
I am sure
I would swoon as well.
I've never thought of myself as swoon worthy, but. You're really starting to gas me up where I feel like I have the confidence to continue this with my wife now.
So I'm glad to help.
how are you for real? Is there anything new, exciting, something noteworthy that's going to be happening in the near future with Jacob?
Have a wedding coming up later this year.
Yes.
Very excited. Yes, you are my best man for my wedding.
And we have to like construct. We talked about this recently. This all-in bachelor party, like hangover event of the season.
Yeah, absolutely. I expect to get a hangover probably from one drink.
Ooh.
And
well, I'm excited. I think we've kind of entered this warp from 2020 to now 2024, where I feel like life has just smacked me in the face with a ton of bricks, and I keep trying to get up and push forward and realize that, yes, it's 4 years past 2020, and I can't imagine how it feels to have been together, thinking about planning a wedding, and now having a wedding. Does it feel like you've been engaged for years?
We joke that the time dilation during COVID, like we've been together 7 years. We've been together 8 years. It's because of the shut-in. We
really
spent.
Though?
What?
Has it really been that long? Or are you just...
Oh, I'm joking. Yeah, no, we've actually been dating since 2010, and
oh my gosh, prom together?
Just kind of forgot to tell you.
Yeah,
nose? I blew her off to take you to prom, actually.
Yes, and that was in your house, and we watched a Lord of the Rings marathon backward, or at least tried to. Everybody, just clearing the air here. We did not go to prom. We sat at Jacob's home together and watched Lord of the Rings backward, but completed one movie. We had a pizza. We took a shot of, I think, Jack Daniels and said, wow, that was a lot. And that was it. That was prom 2014.
Senior prom 2014.
Hey, who's counting?
I would also like to point out, when you say shot, there was a total of one shot. We both didn't take. Yeah. Yeah, it was half.
It was just one for us.
No, it was half. Yeah, half each. Yeah. So we were really wild back then. And I think us wanting to watch The Lord of the Rings backwards is kind of the definition. Well, and then us not completing watching the whole trilogy backwards is kind of like our thing. We're very ambitious. We have great ideas.
Yeah.
And then we get about a third of the way through and we're like, we got there.
Yeah, we got there, but we didn't complete the show.
Yeah, absolutely.
I agree with you. That is how I feel about myself too. I'm glad you pointed that out. I feel like I set something hot off the rip, and then I'm like, forget about it. But hey, we're making progress. Mm-hmm. I have this podcast. We're recording the second episode right now. I'm kind of doing something here. And in your case, you got engaged to Kristen, and you're going to marry her. Look at us. Look at us.
That's 100% right there.
That's growth. So now I'm going to ask every guest this, and ask my mom. But at least I think I did. If I forgot that kind of sucks. But what actor or even actress do I remind you of?
Yeah, easy answer.
Really?
Will Ferrell.
Really?
Will Ferrell. And he's funny, he's affable, and like he can kind of make any kind of dumb situation like palatable and comedic. And you have that power to do that. And so whenever I watch Elf, one of my favorite movies as well, I see you sometimes.
Wow, you see me as I'm Buddy.
Yeah, you are.
Well, honestly, sometimes I do feel like Will Ferrell. I feel like he has such a way to bring a childlike wonder to his comedic performances and never lose that spirit, as I feel like so many of us are trying to grasp onto. And I really do try to ground that in myself. Like, hey, I'm still a kid at heart. I'm never going to lose that part of me. And if I can bring that and make it digestible to people around me, then I will. Then I will. Transitioning into palatable, digestible things. We're here to talk about one, coffee.
Yes.
And if you can give me a sense of where that world is rooted for you, what coffee shop do you love to frequent? Top choice.
Wow. So there's a lot of coffee shops that I really do enjoy. You know, I live in a very, very bougie area, and so there's a lot. There's a lot. Yes, me. I'm very bougie at heart. But there's this one coffee shop called Northside Social.
Okay. It sounds very like bougie.
Yes. Yeah. Yes, it's down here in Virginia. There are two locations, but we go to the one in Falls Church, and I really like the subtlety of their flavors, and I like I'm not a big fan, so I really love lattes. Lattes are one of my favorite things, but for me, they have just this best combination of this milk taste and with the espresso and just a little bit of syrup.
Or milk? Are you a milk person?
I am unfortunately a milk person. MELK.
Oh, no.
Yes.
So I didn't know that about you.
Yes.
That drastically changes my opinion of you, even after 20 plus years of friendship. Okay, but sorry, just to expand upon, you like the subtlety of their flavors. Can you expand upon that?
Well, so when you have a syrup, if you will, sometimes that can be very heavy. It can be very sweet. It can be very like in the face. Like it feels like that's the only like it's the only thing you're tasting in there.
Okay.
But sometimes that's too much.
You like them to fly under the radar.
Mm-hmm.
You like, but like maybe the coffee to be more prominent, or
yeah, like you want the espresso in a latte, say, or you want the flavor of a pour over, or the taste of the milk a little bit. You know, you want that sort of combination to come together.
You want this like symphony of flavors to be flying under the radar, but supporting each other.
Yeah, absolutely. And I like to, whenever thinking of flavors, I like to think about, you know, Disney Pixar's Ratatouille.
Please continue.
There's
you
a
had
scene.
Me at hello.
There's a scene in Ratatouille where Remy is explaining to, I believe, his brother about the taste he gets when he eats cheese and when he eats a fruit.
I don't recall this, so go ahead.
Yes. It might have been a fever dream. This might not be in the movie.
Disclaimer, everybody. This may not be Ratatouille. This might be Jacob's fever dream. Go on.
Well, he eats the cheese and he gets this like popping and this like little whistling or something. And then he eats the fruits and he gets horns. No, he gets this like warm hum. But then when he eats them together, and that's his whole point of telling the story, they create this new idea. They create this new fancy music, this dance symphony, as you call it. So it's finding that combination. That's
interesting.
That's what I really love when I'm drinking a coffee.
Okay. Is there a specific flavor you're more inclined to favor?
For flavors, I would say, you know, I'm a real
maybe a note for coffee.
Notes. Yeah, I'm definitely on the sweet side. I really like.
Me too.
I really like the chocolates or the vanilla notes.
Okay.
And those are my favorite.
I'm definitely a sweet tooth myself. When people say something's too rich, that's usually my wheelhouse right there. I do like a good vanilla. I think in my coffees, if it's not just like a syrup, if it's just like the note of the beans themselves, I do like a more nutty, more nutty kind of flavor, whether it's like a toffee or an almond.
Okay,
I'm just drawn towards those notes.
But that's definitely when I'm when I'm wanting something fancy, generally 95% of the time I'm drinking black coffee.
Fair.
I will say.
Fair.
It's a complexity, but like not too complex.
Okay.
That makes sense.
What flavors do you stay away from? Is there any?
The fruitier ones.
Really?
Yes.
What about like a chocolate with a fruit?
See, that I'm okay with.
Uh-huh.
But when it's more of that bright, like papaya or a mango.
You say papaya? Who's putting papaya in their coffee?
No one's putting papaya in their coffee, but it's the notes.
Okay.
It's the notes you get from the
that
bougie,
out, huh?
the bougie coffee roasters, creating this flavor through the roast. But like those lighter, like acidic notes, in the top of the tongue.
I just picture you in a coffee house. You take your first sip of coffee, you just spit it out violently, and you're like, papaya.
Well, that's what I do on every Saturday. I put on my turtleneck.
Okay.
I get my beret.
Wow.
And both black, of course. And I go into coffee shops. I taste a coffee, and then I make a scene.
So, what I'm distilling from that is you like to appropriate a Frenchman and go to coffee houses and make a scene.
Of course.
Okay. That's something that I've learned about you.
Yeah.
Going back to, was it North? Was it North Side?
North Side Social.
Okay.
Yes.
Did anything in particular draw you there? Was it just the location itself, the ambiance, or
location? Good coffee, good food, fantastic baked goods.
Okay. Spoken from the Frenchman himself.
Oui.
And speaking about you, the Frenchman, once again, you chose for your drink a simple French press brewed coffee. And why? So,
for me, the French press, for probably a solid 2 years, while I was in graduate school, all I drank when I was at home was a French press.
Wow, that's dedication.
Yes, it is. I very much enjoy the process. You know how some people really enjoy espresso machines for that process. The grinding of the beans, making sure everything's perfectly distributed, tamped. Oh, yeah. I like the process of a French press, and everything's timed. Your water takes generally the same amount of time to heat up.
Yes.
Your bean water amalgamation, it's 4 minutes.
Bean water.
Yeah, it's 4 minutes, and then 4 minutes it's up from the top of the plunger down to the bottom. It's another 30 seconds, and so you know how close you are to coffee every time.
Thank you for taking the audience through the process, because I think it's very important that it's said that it feels ritual. There's a habit in making French press coffee. You wake up, you know what to expect. In my opinion, I feel like it sets you up for the day ahead. Mm-hmm. You have this scheduled process that not only gets you the most out of your beans, but I think it also just gives you a little bit of the morning to maybe impatiently wait for your coffee, but also reflect on the day ahead. I don't know.
Mm-hmm. No, I'd say so. It's really easy to put your coffee grounds into a nice drip coffee. There's nothing wrong with drip coffee. I do have drip coffee almost every single day.
Yeah,
but it's like you said, it's that morning routine that you're involved in the whole process. Other than waiting for the beans to soak, to steep, you're doing everything.
And I just love that. When you get to the end, after you've boiled your water, you've slowly poured it over the grounds, you've broken up the crust as the coffee rises to the top, stirring it, placing your lid over, letting it steep, as you mentioned. And then you have this satisfying, slow press, hence the name, where the filter is pressed over the risen coffee grounds to the bottom, aerating the bean water, bringing out that flavor. And it's important that you press it down slowly because the end product is rich, vibrant, and sometimes very strong.
No, absolutely. I hearken back to an episode of Alton Brown's Good Eats on the Food Network.
Oh,
one of my favorite.
You're a Food
favorite
Network
shows.
enjoyer?
Oh, absolutely. One of my favorite shows growing up. In an episode, he makes a French press, and every time I do make one and I'm pushing the plunger down, I think to myself, the words that he spoke when he did it is that when you're pushing the plunger down, is you're making an emulsion. And I think that's the difference of a French press to a lot of other coffees, because you're agitating the water, you're agitating the oils that are coming out of the coffee, and you're mixing them together. And like you said, it creates this rich, full-bodied, flavored coffee. And not just in the flavor, but, and I hate to sound like a very snotty Frenchman, but the mouthfeel as well.
Yes.
It's very nice.
It's almost velvety in texture. You really see this bright colored foam after you pour the coffee that I think is reflective of the punch of flavor that you're going to get on that first sip.
Yeah.
Can we just talk about the design of the French press itself? It hasn't changed over the years. And wow, did they get it right the first time? It's all in one. You can take it apart, easy to clean, and back wherever you store it.
Mm-hmm.
Done. You don't have like coffee grounds sitting in a filter that you have to clean and put back in. Now, of course, it's in the pot of French press itself, but I feel like it's much easier to clean. And I don't know. I've never been the type, even though I do love coffee, to have purchased my own espresso machine. Mm-hmm. Because I don't know if you've ever seen videos, maybe on TikTok, with the espresso machines, but it is a lot of work.
Yes,
it's a science.
I'm a targeted demographic for all of the espresso machine gadgets.
They're fielding you all the coffee on TikTok.
Yes, they are.
Now, before we transition into the movie world, I have to ask you, how do you think coffee brings, let's say, two people together?
If you get coffee at a coffee shop, you're drinking the same thing. You're drinking the same beans. You're drinking from the same pot. When you're with someone, you're having the shared experience. You might not know it. It's maybe more spiritual than you think, or coffee to me, it brings people together through its warmth. I really enjoy that aspect of it.
I do too. It's something to surround yourself with people you love, maybe more so in the morning or the early afternoon, and it just kicks off the day. You know what you're getting. You know it's going to bring you some energy. You know that you're already getting a reciprocal energy from the people you're with to propel you throughout the day. Transitioning into film. For your movie, you chose a courthouse drama, thriller, multiple character study, 12 Angry Men. Now, this movie was met with widespread critical acclaim when it was released in 1957. It's black and white. It's mostly dialogue in one room. And I want to ask you, in 30 seconds, can you give the audience a synopsis of 12 Angry Men?
I think I can. Spoiler free, or
no? Just go all in.
Go all in. 12 jurors are tasked with determining whether or not an 18-year-old kid will be sent to the electric chair for the crime of murdering his father. For the most part, 11 out of the 12 jurors say guilty. Main character Henry Fonda, we can just call him by his actor's name, I think. He says not guilty. And from there, the movie sets off.
That was about 35 seconds. I don't know if you heard my timer. I think that was perfect. I applaud you because
Thank you.
it is a very simple structure, but there is so much packed into that like hour and 20 minutes. Mm-hmm. It'll fly by you if you let it. If you take the time to sit there for that hour and 20 minutes and, accept what is coming your way, I think you'll find that the story is so engrossing right from the rip. Would you agree with that?
It's one of those movies that you can watch dozens of times and you still see a new thing every single time. You said it in your introduction. Yeah, this is hugely based on characters, all based on dialogue, but it's also the little things that the actors do that tells this story.
Yes. And not just the actors, but I feel like it's little things that the direction does as well. I think to the opening shot of the film, it's this shot where it pans up toward this towering courthouse. I didn't realize it in the moment, but when the scene transitioned just after, and there was a shot panning down on the civilians within the courthouse below, it almost gave a sense of like the law, justice is above all. And that is what we're here for. And at what lengths are we going to go to protect that?
Mm-hmm. Absolutely.
And that's really where these characters come in, the story. You see the courtroom, the jurors are sitting in there, and you see the defendant on trial. A boy, maybe in his teenage years, perhaps. You see the jurors go to the juror room, and the boy knows that, they're going to be making his verdict. Mm-hmm. And it shows this face of like total overwhelming, emotion that you get from the boy. I love how they transition and fade away that shot of his like close up to his face onto the juror's table, mm-hmm. where his fate is going to be decided.
Yeah. I
thought that was incredible.
I'm really glad you brought up, that opening scene, since like you said, it's such a strong scene. It tells you everything that you kind of need to know about the film. Like you said, it opens with the courthouse and then the downward looking onto the people as they're just going about their days at the courthouse. People are celebrating winning a court case. One person looks a little afraid, like he's about to go defend someone or he's about to go prosecute someone.
Right.
And then you pan into this quiet courtroom. All these other stories, they probably have a story just like the one we're about to watch. But this one in particular, we get this like pinprick size look into the sort of everyday of, the criminal justice system. In this one case, the thing that really sticks out to me is, the first bits of dialogue are from the judge, and the judge just kind of looks annoyed. He's done this a million times. He's lackadaisical about reading,
yes.
You're all about to go into the courtroom or about to go into jury deliberation. All jurors have to agree to convict. And so to him, this is just another day. This is just another defendant. This is just another prosecutor saying that this person committed a crime. And so I think that that's really impactful for the monotony of sort of the everyday court and then what we're about to see in the jury room.
Yeah, you're right. It's interesting. I think it's juxtaposed with the judge, like you mentioned, where he gives this very lazy, unenthusiastic, like summary of the proceedings that are about to happen to the defendant. We have someone's life here in balance because he is being charged with murder, but it just seems so void of any emotion by the judge. And he said, we're here to separate the fact from the fancy. It's just such an interesting way to state that. Like, mm-hmm. the fancy, I don't know what exactly he was. I don't know if that's just a term back then, but it almost seems like the judge just does not care about this person's life in front of him. Like there's some sort of preconceived understanding about this person in front of him, and I think we'll get back into that later. But yeah, it for something that should have so much meaning, there doesn't seem to be a whole lot. It's just kind of procedural.
Yeah.
You know, after the jurors leave the courtroom, after the judge gives those proceedings, they enter the juror room. And it's a simple room. It's probably, I don't know, maybe 30 feet by 20 feet room, very small, just enough space to walk the perimeter of the table. Immediately, we're given the setting. It's a hot summer day, sweltering. It's definitely the late 50s. People are smoking throughout the entire room. Everyone seems to be like, this is procedural. We're here to just go through this pretty quickly. And the first quote that kind of sets the tone for the initial discussion with the jurors is, yeah, you know, we're here. You know, everyone's not excited about it, but, you know, at least we were lucky to get a murder case. They clearly don't have any idea about the gravity of the situation. Mm-hmm. What did you think about the tone from the characters in the beginning?
You learn so much about them in the beginning. Every character, I'd say, except the old man, you learn a little bit about them. The foreman, he's all business. He wants to get started. Like the nerd, I don't want to call him the nerd, but juror number 2.
No, that's exactly what they meant him to be.
Yeah. Fun fact, I just as a tangent here, the actor who played him actually voiced Piglet in Winnie the Pooh. Yeah. Wow. Yeah. Anyway, you know, we learned that, you know, he's inquisitive. He's asking people, you know, what did you think of it? I think he's kind of looking for validation. He's looking to, you know, see what people are thinking, but everyone kind of just keeps, you know, brushing him off. Juror number 3, the one with the son, the excitable one, you know, he's telling people about his life. He's telling people about his son. It pretty much goes around the room, and you learn who these people are, or like the kind of person that they are. And so the movie does a really good job of telling their stories in such a compact way.
I agree. I think that initial setup in the juror room, it definitely gives an extended shot of the conversations they're having together when they first meet each other, where they are relative to the other characters in the room. It tells the audience, the viewers, who they are as people, so you can get the understanding of how and where they're coming from on their verdicts at the beginning and maybe evolving to the end. It's not even their discussions that really tell who they are. It's their body behaviors and their positioning. The one man, I think it's juror number 8, who gives the only not guilty verdict in the beginning. Mm-hmm. He's standing apart from the others.
Yeah.
He's looking out the window. He's silent. People try to come up to him and talk to him, and he won't really have anything of it. He's steeped in thought. He's reflecting on the case, and he's really the one who, despite hearing from the lawyers in the courtroom, is really thinking about what he's heard and analyzing it so he can give the best decision possible. I really appreciate how they not only took dialogue, but they also took behaviors and married the two in deciding who these characters were going to be and what their convictions are. What really stood out to me in the beginning is when they're taking the initial vote, right? It's like they all have their roles. You have the nerd, and he's kind of timid, and there's this guy at the top of the table, and he's assumed himself as the leader or director of the group. And I thought it was interesting in this small chasm of a room that these men would get together, and you can already see humanity be thrust upon them. Like they're already deciding their roles, right? Yeah. It's a system. So juror 1 is at the head of the table, and he's like, okay, we're going to cast our vote now. And they do. He says, raise your hand if you think he's guilty. Most people raise their hands, but there's like 3 or 4 of them amongst that guilty group initially that slowly raise their hands with the guilty group. Like they're just trying to conform to that popular opinion. And I thought, again, just going back to that human instinct of roles, and now we're here with group thought, right?
Mm-hmm.
Those were the first few to also change their tide later in the evening as well.
Yes.
What did you think about the lack of interest in the beginning and its impact on the first initial vote?
So for me, I'd like to put myself sort of in their shoes. You know, if I was, juror number 12, I just sat through a 6-day long trial. I heard arguments against the defense. They seemed really likely. It comes to this point where you're like, well, the defense really doesn't have much to say. It doesn't really have much to, shoot back
right
at the prosecution. And it's, you have, evidence that someone saw it. We have evidence that someone heard it. We have someone said that they saw the boy run out of the building. Hearing that over and over for a 6-day trial, it kind of sounds like the truth. And so
sure, yeah.
As a juror, I would look at that and say, they've convinced me. Like, this is great arguments. The analysis of it makes sense. It's plausible. And so looking at these men and they're all voting, there is that group thing among there, but all these men have conviction. All these men have some sort of agency that's driving them to make these votes. Putting yourself in that situation, I don't know if I would, sit there and say, oh no, not guilty. It's having this one-sided argument that all these people have heard and felt throughout this entire proceeding. And so, that first vote, like you said, there are some people that, that weren't sure when they're raising their hand, and they were the first to sort of, bounce to that not guilty. It's just really interesting to put yourself in that sort of position. And I'm sure half of them asked themselves, or kind of knew, that they were going to say that he was guilty. But it's, looking at the evidence, kind of how could you not, without really thinking about every step, every counterfactual, like they had gone through in the film. So it's good to see that there are smarter people in the room than I would have been in that situation.
And you also have, that narrative that the prosecution had during the trial, again, like you said, was hammered in their minds, when that narrative might not necessarily be the truth. Mm-hmm. Because you see throughout the jurors' discussion throughout the evening that they've come up with their own narrative that sounds quite plausible in favor of the defendant.
Yeah.
And it's interesting because when juror 8, he seems very stubborn at first because he's going against the group. He's the only member of the jury that has voted not guilty, and people turn on him instantly. I don't think there's one primary antagonist in the film, but I would have to say juror number 3 and 10 are the most volatile. Would you say? Okay.
I would have to agree.
They really rally the not guilty group in the beginning to restate the facts, go over the case, and juror number 8's his mind's not even there on the facts in a way. He's really trying to circumvent the prosecution's argument because he says in the beginning, it doesn't even seem like the defending team even tried during the courtroom case. Like they would just let things go. Like they almost knew they were beat, or they didn't believe in the client that they were serving. And I have to wonder, at what point for the not guilty crew do you just accept the narrative laid out versus not like pursuing your own interests, is what I'm trying to say.
I think for me, right there, that's the point. No pun intended. That's the point. That reasonable doubt really
right.
comes into it. Like there's coincidences, but that's a huge coincidence to take on faith, though. The fact that prosecution hammered, oh, this is one of a kind. They went to the person who sold it and said it's one of a kind, and Henry Fonda shows up with a switchblade that looks exactly like it. That's damning right there.
Yeah, and like you said, that knife, that smoking gun, so to speak, is the first point where doubt has risen truly within the jurors. You find that the knife that supposedly the defendant used to kill, his father, it's not so rare of a knife, is it? Because Juror 8 had gone to a local pawn shop to pick up the very same knife that looks very ornate and possibly rare itself. But again, I think it brings in that first theme of reasonable doubt and uncertainty when there was supposed to be absolute truth. You see this swinging tide from an 11-1 guilty verdict amongst the jurors to a 12-0 not guilty verdict.
They're not talking about truth. The point of the trial was it suss out the truth? In calling it the truth, it kind of pushes the narrative that it is the truth. And that's not the point that the jury has to make. You know, the whole thing isn't to figure out the truth. It's not to be arbiters of right and wrong. It's to see whether or not this kid actually could have committed murder or couldn't have committed murder. You know, there's this not large gap, but there is a gap between what is the truth and what is something reasonable doubt. And you know, I think Henry Fonda, juror number 8, brings up the fact that like no one will ever know the truth. We won't ever know the truth of what happened. The boy could have killed the father, but there's this room of reasonable doubt that exists.
Sure. And while they're trying to decide the fate of one man's life or one boy's life, they're examining the backgrounds and the convictions of one another. It kind of brings in the motif of not only the relationship between men in itself, like the relationship between, let's say, the father and his son with juror number 3, and how he's become estranged from his son because they gotten in a physical altercation. It kind of goes back to the case at hand as the defendant and his father supposedly got into altercations so violent that one was killed. Between the jurors themselves, they're almost at each other's throat as well. I wonder, thinking about the recent discussions in today's society about toxic masculinity, men's relationships with one another, what do you think this film has to say about today's society? Any connections there?
I'm going to make a broad generalization that, in the 50s, in the 40s, there are a lot of movies that showcased the masculinity, the stoicism, the stoicism of man. You see through the eyes of a lot of these men that there's this other humanity other than that stoic, I'll always go forward, I'm a rock. All these men have fears, anxieties, wants, needs, prejudices that make them imperfect, that don't make them this rock of society. And I think what this movie really does well is shows, especially juror number 3, when he's talking about his son near the end, and he becomes so overwhelmed with emotion, realizing that he himself is the problem, and him breaking down and ripping up the photo of him and his son. That's a huge thing to show in a movie. It's
powerful, it's gripping, and you're right. It's almost like a shedding of this superficial armor, right? Of manhood. I'm glad you brought that one particular scene where he's shredding the picture and he breaks down, because throughout the evening he is just sleeves up, like ready to rip someone to shreds over his own convictions, whether they're supported or not. I'm also glad you brought up the point about prejudice, because again, I feel like we're talking about a cross-section of different ages, ethnicities, social classes. That's not very much different from today, but I feel like there was obviously a lot less acceptance, goodwill amongst the social demographics, right? One of those instances, I think juror number 3 and 7, who are technically supposed to be the younger men on the table, but they're really kind of old. Like everybody's old, but everyone's also like, you young man, you. But I think they're all really old. Or maybe life back then, everyone was just like smoking all the time and like they do in the room, and everyone just looks old. That's possible. They might be like 30 or 40s, but look like in their 70s. Anyway, juror 9 is the old man. You can tell he comes from a background of, I don't know, he's seen a lot, he's experienced a lot of things and can be more accepting because he's lived it. He's walked the walk. People have almost like a ageism against him, specifically juror number 3 and 7, like I mentioned, and they won't even hear his side of the story sometimes, always knocking him down a couple pegs because he's old. His opinion doesn't matter because he's almost like separated from the current society due to his perceived age limitations. Can you think of any other instances of these prejudices kind of surfacing around the table?
Just to, follow up on the, the old man, and everyone sort of like saying, what do you know? There's the point where he talks about the old man, the old man who lives below, the murder scene. He says, he's old. No one wants to listen to him. No one cares about him. Someone, asked him, what do you know about it?
Yeah.
And he goes silent.
Right.
You just know that when he's talking about this old man, he's talking about himself.
Oh, interesting.
He sort of sees himself in that situation. And I think that's powerful, the way that they did that.
Yeah, just kind of transferring those feelings.
The prejudice around the room, it's, you can see this bubbling, xenophobia against the juror number 11, the European watchmaker.
Right.
They give him the time of day, but they're kind of not listening to him.
Correct.
They're kind of already shooting him down when he's standing up, giving his sort of speech about, there are some good things about this, and he goes on about the great parts about, democracy and, the legal system, and they're kind of just waving him off. They're not really listening. The most brazen aspect of prejudice is juror number 5. They're talking about the people
right
out of these slums that
Yep.
They're all murderers and they're born that way, and he speaks up. He's from the quote unquote slums. They say, no, it's not personal. It's not you. They're not talking about you. That's such a powerful line. These people have prejudice, but it's only when they're not there.
Right.
It's the people they don't talk to or communicate with. It's them. To showcase years of segregation, redlining, completely different areas for people to live in just due to, income or race. It's a huge line that really just brings that all together.
For sure. Even in something simple like when they're going over the downward thrust of the defendant's, supposedly his blade, into the old man, trying to show that maybe he couldn't have made that downward thrust as one of the not guilty side's arguments. And that juror number 5 you were talking about, who's had experience in those areas that they're actively dismissing, he takes that knife, which is really a switchblade. He says, if you're really from these parts, you're not going to be making a downward thrust. And I think it like perfectly encapsulates in a very small amount of time that the other jurors have no idea what it's like to be from that walk of life, and they should not be giving their opinion on it.
Yeah.
I think it's those little things that they do in those discussions, in those arguments that really not only bring light to those prejudices and the convictions of the people around the table, but it also highlight the tension in the room.
Mm-hmm.
Because that alone has its own play into the film, where small things, again, fuel the flames. Like, we're talking about the sweltering heat that they keep talking about. They're like, for some reason, they're profusely sweating throughout the entire movie. Like, it almost gets to the point where it's uncomfortable. Like, these people should not be sweating this much. Like, they start out, they're dabbing their face, like, with these cloths that they have in their back pocket. It's such an old age kind of thing, but they're just dabbing their face. I think juror number 10 specifically, like, he won't stop dabbing his face. I think he might have had a cold, though, is what he said. Okay.
Yes.
Okay. Well, either way, like, they're just like, they're sweating. Like, at first it's just their face, and then it's their clothing. They're sweating out of their like armpits and their chest. And it's like, oh my God, like, kind of highlights again, like, they're exerting themselves mentally, and it's exhausting. And the heat just has so much to do with the rising tensions in the room.
Yeah.
And even the thunderstorm that kind of qualms the heat, it just shows the clashing of arguments coming to head as well. I want to also point out something as small as the fan finally working, because apparently they have an issue with this fan in the beginning in the room that's not working, and that's why they're like sweating buckets. When they finally get the fan to work about midway through the discussion, there's this like droning hum from the fan throughout the rest of the argument as it's coming to head. And with the thunder, that fan just kind of gives this uncomfortable tension and atmosphere that I think really service the plot well.
Mm-hmm. I don't want to get too English class 11th grade on this movie.
Uh-oh. No, please do.
But you bring up the fan. When they walk in and they try to turn on the fan, it's kind of just assumed it just doesn't work.
Right.
And everyone's like, well, it's just what we're going to have to live with. This fan is broken.
Hey, coming from a man, being a man myself, that is something that we do. Yeah. Or we're like, if we don't know how to do it, we're just like, well, it's got to be the fan. It's no way around this.
Exactly. Like, the fan's broken. That's the story right there. But they turn on the light, the fan just starts working. If you think about it in terms of the way that they're going about unveiling more information.
Okay.
The fan itself is kind of like that. They all assumed at the beginning that he was guilty, that the fan was broken.
Right.
But throughout the day, when things change, like the thunderstorm makes it dark, they turn on a light and they try the fan again. Oh, wait. Guess it was tied to the light. And so they're kind of all figuring out some new information, and the fan is sort of like this object that, you know, showcases that.
No, that's incredibly profound, because you're right. The fan is almost like a plot device that is used to highlight the overarching conversation and what has happened to these jurors from the initial narrative in the courtroom. That's interesting. That's something I didn't even think of.
I'd like to just point out this it's so minute that I'd only caught it this last time. When juror number 3, you know, he has his just gigantic wallet.
It is quite large.
It's big, and he probably has back problems if he's keeping that in his back pocket. He uses it as like a way to like introduce himself. He uses it as this like window into himself. There are certain points when he's talking about, you know, here are the facts. When he says that, he pulls out his wallet. There's no notes in his wallet or anything, but he says, here are the facts. He takes out his wallet, and his wallet is the picture of him and his son. So in a way, you know, it's showcasing the audience that like his facts are tied to him in his personality and his history.
So I think we'll we'll take a bit of a recess. We'll come back. We'll play our game. Hopefully, I'll keep my victories alive, and then we'll just kind of go for a verdict for the film. Is that cool?
Sounds good.
All right. Podcast. You mentioned before we hop back on that you are also nursing a French press coffee.
Yes, I am. It is.
I did do it specifically for this just moments before we hopped on the call.
Perfect. Yes.
Are you proud of me?
I am very proud of you. It, from the picture you sent, looks beautiful.
It's hitting. I told you this. The ratio was off. The moment I took my first sip, I was like, whoa! Like I am ready. I was ready to go. I'm ready to go. And I've been trying to drink it slowly. I'm about half done with about, I don't know, a cup to 10 ounces. And I'm normally a coffee drinker who will just pound through it. How about you?
Yeah, no, that's the big problem also with French press. It also gets cold really quickly. It's because like there's no like when you have like drip, you have that hot plate, but with this you have that nice insulating glass that doesn't keep in heat at all. And so you gotta down 3 cups of coffee real quick. You know, you gotta be fast. That's what I really like. What I really like about French press, it's you get the coffee and you're done.
Well, for Christmas recently, I got one of those Ember mugs.
Oh,
that you put it on the charged hot plate, and the mug itself also has a battery, and it kind of keeps it at a specific temperature that you can control on your phone. I like it. It's just a lot of extra work to do. Like I don't know if I'm gonna continually do this. Like only on my days off can I do this.
So do you normally nurse a coffee, or are you someone that just
no? Like I said, I it goes right down the pipe.
Okay, yeah. For me, I don't think I have properly finished a cup of coffee in years. There's always that little.
You're like my wife Katie.
There's always that little bit of coffee left at the bottom. That's like it's too cold at this point, but like you can't heat it up in the microwave because then it's going to taste a little off.
In my house, like my wife, there is perpetually like 4 to 5 drinks always present through the house. Like there's a water she hasn't finished. There might be a tea that she hasn't finished, and there might be coffee from the evening prior that's also not finished. So I understand what your house might also look like, considering you don't follow things through. Like we talked about before.
we
and that might go all the way down to your drinks. Yes, in a way we have come full circle on this conversation. No, I make it a pact that I finish what I start. So yeah.
It's beautiful.
Hustle culture.
another circle we've
That's what we like. We like tying things with bow ties on the Being Real podcast.
Yeah.
Okay. So trying to tie this with a bow tie, we are going to attempt to give our final verdicts on the film because we've been singing its praises, I think, from the beginning. We'll get to that. But first, I would like to keep my winning streak alive on the podcast. I am 1-0 on the season for 2 truths and 1 lie.
Oh, wow.
I wiped the floor with my mom last episode, and now I would like to propose the challenge to you. Do you accept?
I do accept.
Okay. So I'm sure you're familiar with how this game is played. It's kind of in the title, but you're going to try to snuff out the lie after I've listed 3 facts. Fact number 1. The movie obviously features long cuts throughout its runtime where there's like no abrupt cuts. It's a lot of like discussion around the table. As far as editing the movie, creating those various cuts without various cameras that are already existing throughout, the real editing is actually featured in the last 20 minutes of the runtime of the film. Fact number 2. The characters in the film would often spend multiple hours talking with one another that was never filmed, just trying to hash out discussion, arguments, improv that may or may not have been used in the film. Fact number 3. The film 12 Angry Men, despite its widespread critical acclaim from the very first moment it was released to even now considered a classic, bombed at the box office. It was actually Henry Fonda's only ever produced film. He tried his best to keep the film afloat, and he was a big star at the time, but it was a flop. Jacob.
Yes.
What is the lie here?
What is the lie? So we've got, there's no real editing to the last 20 minutes. I made sure to write these down. Characters spend multiple hours talking with one another, arguments, improv, and the film bombed at the box office.
Yes.
Now, this is really hard because you can tell that there's like editing throughout the film. You know, they have those, pans, they have cuts.
Right.
I mean, we talk about editing. What in your mind's eye, what is the definition of editing?
Well, in my opinion, editing is in post-production, I feel like, where you can kind of curate those cuts and those different camera angles and construct a film from that. Potentially, it could be from the very start of the film. Who knows? Okay. They might have done it differently here.
That's true. It's a really interesting fact that they would kind of just set up cameras and then the actors would talk to each other in character with arguments and improv.
Yeah.
You can kind of tell that, I think, in the film that, some of these lines are kind of just like one-offs that, a person wouldn't, Sidney Lumet, when I think he wrote the film and directed it, would just write down, he's like, and then juror number said, but I don't know. Like the film bombing at the box office, you look at the film and you think, man, this is a great film. How could it have possibly bombed at the box office? But it was also the 1950s.
Okay.
Which makes me think, maybe, there's a lot of films in the 1950s. It was, it felt like it was during, the golden age. It was a whole era.
Yeah.
And,
you're right. Golden era of Hollywood.
Lot of films, lot of courtroom films. Henry Fonda was in so many of them.
This can be part of my trash talk right now, but I can tell you're walking around your answer here. Yeah, I think you're stumped. I think you're stumped.
I am stumped, but I think I have an answer for you.
Okay.
I think your first fact that there isn't actually any real editing until the last 20 minutes of the film is in fact the lie. I think the film did bomb at the box office, depending on what we define as bomb. And I think that the director did have the characters talk to one another just to get that feeling of an organic conversation.
Jacob, you are not even wrong. That is the lie. Fact 1 is a lie. Damn.
I look 33% chance of getting it, and this is a big achievement. If you don't mind me rubbing it in your face.
I feel it. I feel like there is salt in every wound right now that I am experiencing. I didn't think that I would be going down with a loss in the second episode. I thought it would be kind of a thing where I would run with a winning streak until the end, but wow, I am humbled.
I'm very sorry. This does not bode well for the information at the top episode or of Bean Roll where it lists the record. Very sorry, right. You'll be sullied with a 1 right at the end.
I mean, 1 and 1, I think I'll take that right now.
If you think about it, you might never lose again.
I don't know how I feel about you serving me a loss and then swooping in with your white cape as the hero and giving me hope. That's quite that's a roller coaster of emotions for a man to go through. And I guess that's what friends are for. They beat you down, but they lift you up.
Yeah, that's what it's all about.
Okay, well, congratulations on being the first victor on the Being Real Podcast's 2 Truths, 1 Lie. Anything to say to the audience about your victory? Any plans?
So I'm gonna put this on my resume. This will go on LinkedIn.
Right.
This will be in my wedding vows later this year, just to make sure everyone knows. Thank you for
No,
this
this would
opportunity.
go on a LinkedIn page.
Yeah,
This for
yeah.
sure would
This
go on
is
a LinkedIn page.
yeah, this is huge. While we're still talking about it, how much did this film bomb?
You know, so I at first want to start with fact number two.
Okay.
You're right. I do feel like it added a more organic chemistry between the actors, and I was surprised, and I thought you might have been tripped up by the fact that they really spent double the time talking with one another than actually like filming the discussion scenes, for instance. Which is almost incredible to be talking that much, knowing you're getting nothing like actually done besides prep work, and
Yeah.
so to speak. But the third fact, I was also surprised that it bombed because I've always heard this is a very highly regarded film, and for it to be so engrossing but bomb, I think it just might have came down to like a PR kind of thing or like a advertisement issue, because I really think it should have uh, gotten some good win from the get-go in its sales, right?
Yeah. It
Okay, let's
didn't.
see. How bad did 12 Angry Men bomb? Let's see.
And also, it didn't get help from its name.
That's fair.
It's a
That's fair.
very
Nobody wants to hear
yeah
12 Angry Men sweat
yeah, and like
during the film,
you have movies that are coming out like Anatomy of a Murder, and
right?
it's
That's
like
provocative. It gets
like
the people going.
yeah, like that courtroom. Like I want to see that. I don't
Yeah.
want to see 12 angry men. I could just walk out to a work site and see that.
You know, the first running title they were going with was going to be 12. Just the number 12.
Wow.
I think that would have been much more provocative than what we got with 12 Angry Men. Would you agree?
Provocative, yes, but I'd have to say it tells you nothing about the film, and I think it would have done worse had it just been 12.
That's fair. That's it. Can we maybe, what if we recontextualize the title here based on what we find in the story? We were talking about sweat, which is a prominent theme, but also a beautiful sight to see throughout the movie. What about 12 Sweaty Men? Do you think that would have tested better?
You know, I don't think so.
Okay,
I think maybe among a certain demographic,
fair.
potentially, would have done
My
better with women.
demographic for sure. Oh,
Oh, yeah.
yeah.
With that long pause,
Well, okay. So I guess what I want to say is, how did this movie test with you? Before we rate the movie, we sung its praises. Is there anything that you didn't like about the movie? Something you might want to nitpick? Because, to be honest, you truly could believe this is a perfect film, and I would not fault you.
you know, it's the bias that I have. This film is very near and dear to my heart, and
Uh-huh.
it's what I would call my favorite film. It's a beautiful story. It's masterfully done. You know, really, I didn't see the movie before as my first introduction to 12 Angry Men. I saw a stage performance of it,
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
and you
It's been
know
adapted
my
many times on the stage.
oh yeah, my dad asked if we wanted to go see a production. I knew nothing of it, but he gave it with this hook. There's a big twist in it,
Right.
and my brother and I were like, let's go, let's do this. Well, fun story. Well, both of my brother and I were watching this film. We both had the same thought at the beginning of the production, and it was, oh, juror number 8 killed the man, and that was the big twist at the end.
Wow.
When we got to the end, and it was like, oh, the twist was actually everyone voted not guilty. I felt,
Interesting.
a little misled, but
Yeah, I could
but
see that.
but I was enthralled for the hour and a half
I
that I was watching this.
I I wish I could fathom a live performance of this, because I feel like it would just give so much more energy to the crowd. Being live, and seeing
Yeah.
real people yelling angrily at one another.
Mm-hmm. And like it's this two mediums. You know, you have the stage, and then you have the film, and then the film really brings out the faces on the actors, and like different
Sure.
viewpoints they're having, and then the shot, and then just in the theatrical version, like you have the acting, and so they're kind of two different ways of really watching it and experiencing it. You know, I think it all just comes back to I really do love this film. I love the story, and I really can't think of a way to knock it.
1 to 10. Let's hear it.
One attempt?
1 to 10 on your verdict.
Oh.
Let's hear it.
10.
Wow. The guests on the podcast right now are 2 for 2 with perfect 10 scores. And it makes sense because this is your favorite film, as Serendipity was my mom's favorite film. I love to hear the passion for these films. I love to hear the praises. I love to share that with the guests. I am very high on this film as well. I think if I were to nitpick anything, it's kind of the turning of the tide to the guilty to not guilty. They kind of make it this like championing of like, oh yeah, he's not guilty. Like we have some doubt here. It's exciting. There's almost like this like sports kind of excitement around it, like of the turning of the tide. And on one hand, I'm like, this is really cool that he was able to bring this doubt to light for these people. But at the same time, like, what if he's guilty? And we're just like celebrating like this for zero reason and actually for the detriment to the case at hand. But that's my only small nitpick. I think this movie for me, I'm going to give it a 9.5. I think I'm a little bit lukewarm on a courtroom drama itself as a film, but I cannot in any way knock what this film does in such a short runtime. It's masterfully done. It's succinct. And 12 Angry Men, the title, like we were talking about, it gives you no indication what this movie is going to be about. It is gripping, and it's just a discussion amongst men. I don't think normally I would be interested in hearing 12 men talk for an hour and 20 minutes and some change. But this movie does it, and the stakes are high with that murder case, and I think it's deserving of, a 9.75 together, honestly.
Mm-hmm.
Do you think the French press coffee is the perfect complement to this movie?
I do not. I do not think it is.
Okay.
If I had to give a compliment to this movie, I'd say a nice drip coffee you get at a diner. Okay.
See, I would have to disagree with you. I think the French press is perfect. It's bold. It steeps. I really think it's complex. I do think it's the perfect complement for this movie, but I can see where you'd come in with a drip coffee because it just kind of matches that 50s, I don't know, I'm thinking of the diner era type scene in my mind. So I could see a nice drip coffee.
Yes, I'd like to
change this movie.
I'd like to change my answer to yours and use that exact answer.
Okay. All right. Well, I'm glad we can, even when we're disagreeing, I'm glad we can find a common ground. Common grounds.
Oh.
Yeah. That's, I pulled that one out of my ass.
Yeah.
But
oh, brother, this guy stinks!
I had to get it out there. Jacob, I wanted to thank you for being the second guest on the Being Real podcast. I was happy to invite you as my best man and as one of my closest friends to being next on the lineup. I want to say, I know you were talking about a little bit about me in the beginning, but what you bring into my life is a sense of ease. Like everything's going to be okay. Because when I'm hanging out with you, you bring a grounding. I feel like at times in my life, whether I'm working, maybe I'm stressed about something in my life, I can kind of be going haywire. But you kind of bring a grounding presence. And I know that when you're around, and I'm sure other people feel this way too, that we're going to share the simple things, and that's all that's going to matter. And any worries on your brain are going to be quelmed, and you're going to feel whole. So thank you for bringing that to my life.
Well, I'm honored to be able to bring it to your life. Thank you for, honoring me by bringing me onto your podcast and bringing me into this massive endeavor.
You're welcome. And, that's why we're here. That's why we're here doing this podcast, is to get to know the people in my life better, a little bit of a passion project. I think we did that here through this movie, 12 Angry Men. We kind of juxtaposed the title and the film. We're kind of two pleasant friends, but I really enjoyed the time. To our listeners out there, wherever you are, near and far, maybe close to my heart, thank you for tuning in. Thank you for being a part of the Being Real podcast. Here we are, where it's always time to be real.